COVID, in fact, really has highlighted age inequalities for both young workers. So when I talk about young workers, we're talking about 18 to 24-year-olds, and also older workers, 50-plus workers, and especially young women workers and young BAME workers in particular. So this is something that we as a movement really do need to be looking at and really do need to be concerned about. And I think there are a lot of things that union learning can do and union learning reps can do to help. And hopefully I'll take you through some of these as part of that presentation. So I'm going to talk you through the issues that, why we should be concerned about this, what the problem is, why is it a trade union issue, what can trade unions do, and then hopefully take you through some of the schemes and some of the possible solutions. And then at the end, maybe look at the specific role of what a learning rep can do, if that's okay. So this, I don't want to depress you too much with the phrase like a looming issue, but, it's missing on that side, but never mind. So there's a number of academics have referred to this as a looming issue. I mean, youth unemployment in Wales pre-COVID was already starting from a low base. I think the IFS reported that over the last decade, young people have been increasingly working in more lower paid jobs, in 0-hour contracts. And there was already a generational pay gap sort of emerging. I think TUC research in 2018 highlighted that, the gap in average earnings between a 21 to 30-year-old and 30 to 60-year-old was risen in real terms from $3,000 to $6,000 in a pay gap. So that's in 2 decades, it's almost doubled the pay gap for young people. So as you can see, young workers were already before this crisis disadvantaged. Typically in a recession, then younger workers sort of suffer more. And we saw that in the financial crisis, which, unfortunately doesn't seem that long ago to me. And since I've been working in the TUC, I've been through quite a few recessions now. So, but however, COVID is slightly unusual because for a number of reasons, really, that sort of the sectors affected most by this crisis are the sectors that were in lockdown, and the availability of vacancies and new jobs, especially at entry level, are much less at the moment. So basically, to put it in a nutshell, young people are far more likely to lose their jobs, and where young people look for jobs are far less likely to be available. So this is what's led to what the UN actually is referring to as a potential lockdown generation, meaning that young people will face permanent exclusion from the labour market. I mean, recessions make it harder for young people to re-enter the labour market in the first place, but many young people who are looking to begin their careers or gain work experience are looking often to gain work experience and start their careers in the sectors that have been shut down. And those sectors, most projections are a bit shaky on whether they're likely to suffer declines into the medium and longer term as well. So, these industries that young people tend to enter into the labour market on are very much suffering in the long term. The flow back into work is a big issue. I think that this crisis is different to other previous recessions. I mean, vacancies at the moment in Wales are half, actually across the UK, are half what they were this time last year. So the amount of jobs available is half what it was this time last year, and already below the level it was after the financial crisis. So people, who've lost their jobs often find work in the same sectors, and those jobs just aren't there at the moment. So the flow back to work is a real big issue. I think 33% of young people, I think the Resolution Foundation report a couple of months ago highlighted that 33% of young people who lost their jobs at the start of this sort of pandemic, only 33% have found new work. That's compared to 57% of people over the age of 35. So as you can see, it really is. And that's on top of the fact that young people are more likely to lose their jobs in the first place. So really is impacting on young people. The recovery is an issue as well. We almost certainly it's not going to be a V-shaped recovery at the moment. The uncertainty around that is quite obvious. I think some people are still hoping for what they call a U-shaped recovery, but I think, at the moment, it's quite safe to say there's probably a bit of an L-shaped recovery in terms of we don't know when the uptick is going to come. And that's very uncertain. Some young people will stay in education, but even when they come out of education in 3 or 4 years' time, are they going to be the jobs there for them to enter the labour market? Scarring is a particular problem. This is what a lot of academics refer to, a lot of reports refer to as a long-term scarring for young people in the labour market. Any spell of unemployment harms an individual's long-term prospects, both in sort of terms of their future career, but also in terms of their wages. Again, according to the Resolution Foundation report, they're projecting that sort of the employment rate for today's graduates is sort of projected to drop by 30%. Compared to if COVID had never existed, if you know what I mean. But it's really are non-graduates that were expected to suffer the longest scarring effects. I think the projected employment rate for mid and low-skilled young people is potentially set to drop, according to a lot of projections, to around 37%. So that's a huge drop in the availability, in the employment rate for young people that, they think wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for COVID. So there's also one thing that we're talking to Welsh Government about through social partnership as well, is we're very concerned, looking at sort of redundancies at the moment, that this crisis is going to result in more poor quality work, more insecure work. And that, as we know, for young people in particular, if that's the sort of jobs that are going to become available post-crisis, then those jobs don't have access to training. Those jobs tend to have less opportunities to progress as well. So there's a lot of issues that need addressing. Sorry, my slide. Here we are. So, as I said, this is a problem on top of a problem, if you like. This is a graph from way back now, really, if you like. It's 2018, it's the TUC report, where they're already spotting the issues that were sort of coming over the hill for young people. And that report, I mean, if you look at this graph here, you're just looking at the wage difference that's jumped over 2 decades is shocking, and that's the sort of hourly pay wage difference. So that report identified sort of 5 key issues for young workers. One was wage stagnation, as you can see in the graph. The second was that young people tend to be concentrated in low-paid jobs. The third was they have poor access to skills and progression, which is one of the reasons why I'm talking to you about it today. The fourth was that they are more vulnerable to insecure work. And the fifth, and this is a key one for us, I think, is that they tended to have no voice in work. So they're not union members, and I think that is a big issue for us. And I'll be coming on to talk a bit more about that later. This is a slide that I think highlights really well why this is different to other recessions. I mean, if you look at that now, you've got the green is young female workers, the brownie colour, whatever that is young male workers, and that's the percentage of those workers that are in the sectors that were shut down. And you can see that by age bracket, that there's a massive, massive disproportionate level of young people in those sectors. I think out of 195,000 workers in accommodation, food, arts, entertainment and leisure in Wales, out of those 195, 41,000, I think, lost their jobs. And you can see from this slide as well, the different colours on it, is that there is a gender issue as well, and young women workers are far more likely to be affected. So again, quite a shocking graph there, I think. Move on to the next slide. This is about the claimant count. So this includes people who are either claiming job seekers allowance or required to search for work as part of a universal credit. And I just wanted to flag this up because basically the claimant count has more than doubled in Wales over the course of the pandemic. So the amount of young people accessing universal credit or job seekers allowance has doubled. So again, these are worrying statistics for all of us, I think. So this is why I think it's a trade union issue. So this is a while back, the TUC did a report that identified that less than 10% of low-paid young people are in trade unions. So, it's true from what I've just said that young people need trade unions more than ever, but it's also very true that we need them as well because, our movement is aging. And I think this is one of the reasons why we need to discuss this, and we need to discuss this now. I think we all know as soon as people find out in our friends and families that we work for a trade union, that they tend to sort of fire questions at us, especially young people want to know whether this is allowed in work, this isn't allowed in work, if they've got problems in work. So there obviously exists a power imbalance for young people in the workplace. And it begs the question why we're not so good at recruiting them. And I think, this is a wider problem than just looking at it from an unemployment point of view. Obviously, there's, how unions recruit in general is a big issue. But I think potentially skills is a way in. It is an inroad to young workers, amongst other things like, sort of issue-based recruitment, like environmental issues and things like that. But I think engaging through some of the schemes that are coming online to support young people back into work, and if unions keep getting at the ground level on some of those schemes, then I think we've got a really good opportunity to start recruiting more young workers, which is partially why I really wanted to talk to you today about that. So moving on to the next slide. It's in Welsh, actually. There we go. It's all in Welsh. That's fantastic. So anyway, this is Kickstart. This is by no means the only scheme. It's a DWP UK sort of national scheme. I'm sure you've heard of it in the news, but I wanted to flag it up because we are proposing to partner union learning, and in particular Wales Union Learning Fund projects with this scheme to try and gain access to support young workers to retrain, but also gain access to them to talk about their rights and responsibilities at work. So it's a 6-month work placement funded by UK government. They're prioritising 16 to 24-year-olds. they're on the national minimum wage for 25 hours per week plus contributions. The TUC, so our stance really is that they should, employers should top that up to the living wage where possible, provide skills, make sure that the opportunities, that there's equality in those opportunities, that they're not replacement jobs. So, we are asking government and UK government to make sure that some of the limitations of the scheme are covered. There are limitations to the scheme. We all know there's a big difference between job creation and a work placement, and I think that's where we come in as unions. I think employers inevitably may try and abuse this scheme and try and appoint people to plug gaps and not replace jobs. What we're saying is that we could work with our employers, unionised employers, to engage in this scheme, take young workers on, but then maybe turn them into sustainable jobs. Identify things like additional apprenticeship grants, additional funding employers can do, so that when that person finishes their 25 whatever, the 6-month placement, then they can maybe go on to an apprenticeship and things like that. And I think we could play a big role in this, and we are working with DWP in Wales to be involved in the information that goes out to young workers on this, the information that goes out to employers on this as well. And we will be going through the list of employers that are participating in Kickstart to identify union ones, and then maybe have a targeted approach to particular unions to give information, make sure reps are involved, and talk into these young workers as much as possible. I'm sorry, there you go. So these are I won't sort of go on for this slide for too much, but some of these were covered by Patty this morning. These are some of the other things that are specific to Wales that are available for young people who might be facing unemployment or redundancy. You've got Jobs Growth Wales, which is similar to Kickstart. There's the apprenticeship recruitment scheme. Now that's you can get up to, an employer can get up to £3,000 for taking on an apprentice, which is, I don't think, while that's been in place for a while, I'm not sure how many employers know that. So that may be a role for us as unions to promote that. We've spoken about React this morning. There's access grants, there's traineeships. There is employability skills programs, like we shall give young people access to retraining through FE. And there are a number of employability, local, like community and local authority-based employability programs available as well. And I think I just wanted to flag that up. We will be sending all this information out in the post-conference packs, but these are the things I think when we're trying to support young people back in the work and engage with young people, that union learning reps really should know about these schemes. So do your research, look at the stuff we send out. We will be sending stuff out on these schemes and on Kickstart, and we'll be hopefully doing some sort of campaign in January where we target reps and branch meetings to explain some of these schemes and provide people with the information. So then you can go and use your role as a learning rep to negotiate with your employers to say, why aren't we taking on more young people? Why aren't we training young people and supporting young people? I think that's the difference we can make, I think. So finally, this is my last slide. So we've seen that it's a major problem, and we've seen what the issues are. But I think it's really key, and I wanted to flag this up. This sort of occurred to me when I was looking at the issue of youth unemployment. The principles of union-led learning are already there. That they're already sort of set up and designed for this. Like Wolf was set up on a load of objectives that were basically about widening participation, about making sure that people have equal access to training, that working in partnership with employers and progressing in work. And I think those, as we've seen from earlier slides, are the issues for young people. So I think, Wolf and union learning and the role of the learning rep is already there and geared up to provide this sort of support. So I think we just need to make sure that we are aware of what's available and targeting the young people. And I think the next few points, it's about engaging with people. I think we need to engage with young workers. We need to talk to young workers and find out how, what their needs are, how we can engage with them, how we can recruit them into the union, and then how we can support them to progress. Because obviously, the more young people are in good, sustainable, unionised jobs, the more likely they are to be union members. So it's a really key point for us. And the other one is to talk to employers. I know learning reps are busy often recruiting and arranging courses and sort of talking to learners and supporting learners, and that is your key role. But there is another big key role for a union learning rep, and that's the word rep in that. And you are a rep. You are supposed to and allowed to talk to your employers about matters around training and recruitment. And I think, often learning reps either are too busy or they don't get it, they may not get the access to the employers that other reps do. And I think we need to address that, because everything about this crisis in terms of economic recovery is about how skills can impact on this and how we can train our way out of this crisis. And learning reps are going to play a massive role in that. So engaging with employers, raising awareness of those schemes and negotiating on those schemes is absolutely key. Collective bargaining and fair work, we always throw this in, but I think we can change some of this, I think, through that fair work policy. I mean, access to training is a key element of a good quality job. And this, there is a policy move in Wales to push for better social partnership and fair work. And I think you could use that. Skills is a part of that, and we can use that to, get more access to employers and pull levers with employers to make sure that they provide access to training for young people and people of all ages and vulnerable groups. So that is something that plays into this discussion. And finally, economic growth. Don't underestimate the role that learning reps have on economic growth. I think if it was left to employers and providers to sort of train their way out of this recession, it would always be what benefits the employer. And I think the whole point of a learning rep is to make sure that actually it makes more economic sense to bring the whole workforce with you and to make sure that all workers get access to this and get trained. Things like, like just transition, you've seen the videos today, and automation, those issues, if left just to employers, will just be about making money. And long term, that's not good for the economy. We know that. There's so much evidence out there that proves if everyone has got better paid jobs, better skills, then the whole economy improves. So I just wanted to flag that up. Don't underestimate the role as learning reps. And from that, I think I'll wrap up. We will be sending a lot of information out on all of those schemes that I've mentioned today. Just look out for that. We'll be sending a post-conference pack out, but also we'll be targeting all of you as learning reps with a big campaign in January. And I'll hand you back to Ruth. Cheers, Ruth.